Adiga, nerds! I'm Alex.
And I'm Danny.
And we're seriously nerdy. We're still nerdy.
We very much, we checked and we are, Yep, we're still nerdy. If you don't know what Adiga is, it is Anzellan for hello. And if you don't know what Anzellan is, this is gonna be a really boring video for you because we're focusing on an Anzellan.
Depending on when you watch this video, you may or may not have heard that Disney is closing Galactic Starcruiser Hotel in Orlando, Florida, which is devastating. We had the opportunity to go once already, then we heard it was closing and we were like, we better go again. In honor of that bold expenditure, we decided to bring a companion with us on our trip.
Anzellans are an alien race in Star Wars. They're about 9 inches tall and have tiny little hands that are perfect for working on droids. We fell in love with them and they sell a Babu Frick toy at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and we thought, we can hack that, right?
We can hack it.
We decided to make a companion in storyline that was our very own original Anzellan. We're gonna take the toy, we're gonna give him a whole new identity, we're gonna glow him up, we're gonna sew him new clothes, and then Alex is gonna completely reprogram him so that he can say things and interact with crew and passengers on the ship.
Mwahaha!
It's very extra.
Yeah, we a lot.
Tabooey Tay! Cheers! Let's get to it.
If you've been to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, then you're probably familiar with the Droid Depot, an opportunity for you to build your own custom droid. You also have the opportunity to buy Babu Frick, a fully functional Anzellan companion. We wasted no time in taking him out of the box and starting to take him apart to see what we were really dealing with underneath.
Here at the outset, as we took this Babu Frick apart, we knew that it was important to keep every piece, not knowing what we would need later for the Besho character. So having a little jar on the side helped me capture all the little screws and nuts and bolts and just components of this toy so that we could refer to them later.
We took special care to label any wires that we had to snip because we knew we would have to solder them back together when we were done. This was especially important for the speaker, which we knew we were going to connect to the voice box that I would be assembling.
You know, if you think about it, it's pretty ironic that a character that repairs droids is himself a droid that is in need of repair. So I've never attempted a toy deconstruction like this, so for a lot of pieces it was just guesswork, some wiggling, sometimes using a heat gun just to warm joints up a little bit. But the important thing we knew was to try to take this toy apart into as many individual pieces as possible so that when it came time to paint him and apply textures, it was really easy to access everything and we weren't running up against creases or crevices. I ended up running a lot of tests on discarded plastic we had at home just to figure out what would stick to plastic and give it that flesh texture that I was looking for. So I tried caulking and adhesives, and what ended up working the best is this household silicone, which would normally be used to sort of run along your kitchen or bathroom. But when applied like this in a layer, it does give a really nice sort of gummy texture. It's completely dry, but does have that fleshy texture feel? I don't know what to call it, but it works really well for this. So the silicone putty ended up being very forgiving. I could just apply it with a gloved finger here, as many layers as I wanted to, and it didn't dry terribly fast. So not only was I able to add some texture, sort of like a sponge pounce texture, but I was also able to go in and fill in any gaps. We have reached the Mrs. Doubtfire portion of the video where we're gonna make a face for Besho here. So I took the sort of rubbery face that came on Babu Frick and I used this really interesting silicone paint that you can mix with traditional craft paints to stain them any color, but it has incredible flexibility. It turns out it's used by special effects makeup and sort of prop masters because it has this really cool flex to it. Other than sacrificing my paintbrush to become a silicone paintbrush, this was as easy as a standard paint job with just a little more silicone texture to it.
Fun fact, Anzellans have horizontal eyes, not unlike goats from our own human Earth planet. And yes, you guessed it, they are powerful nightmare fuel, so avoid staring directly into them for too long. We cured a thin layer of clear UV resin over the tops of the pupils in order to give it a really good glassy finish.
Now, before you go erecting statues in my name for individually applying every strand of hair to Besho here, you should know that my concept of needling each piece of hair in, like they do at like Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, did not work terribly well. The rubber was just too flexible. Despite my best efforts, I had to give up and use a little bit of silicone as the base just to give the felting wool here something to stick to. But it does end up for a very handsome, elderly, eyebrow, facial hair look for Besho.
If you aren't familiar with Arduino, it's an open source hardware and software you can use to build your own basic microcontroller device. Using an Arduino Uno kit I found online, I paired it with a DF Player Mini, an infrared receiver, and a speaker to create a simple remote-controlled voice box. After testing the circuits on a breadboard to make sure they worked, I then attached a screw shield to the Uno to simplify the wiring process. I knew I was going to need a pretty long cable to go to the IR receiver, since it wasn't going to be able to receive infrared unless it was directly visible to the remote. Since Arduino is open source, I was able to find the vast majority of the programming that I needed online and just copy and paste it in. However, I did run into a lot of problems using the infrared receiver because it was receiving far more signals than I wanted it to. So I did need to use the help of ChatGPT to come up with some custom code that would ignore the erroneous signals. Despite having the screw shield, I knew I was going to need to solder at least some of these cables. It's always important to use proper ventilation and safety equipment when soldering. Those fumes are not nice. I soldered the DF Player Mini to its own board just to make it easier for me to run all of the wires to it. I also have a couple of these, so I didn't mind using one up on one of these boards. I also soldered the speaker from Besho's stomach to some really long wires because I knew it was going to have to run out his back all the way out to the Arduino in his backpack. Danny 3D modeled a little shell that we could put into the backpack to provide some structure and also to protect and house the Arduino unit. It needed to be pretty big because the Arduino is several components stacked on top of each other. So to complete the assembly, we had the case in which the Arduino would sit, a rechargeable phone battery that would power the Arduino, and then the Arduino itself connected to a DF Player Mini and an infrared receiver. We connected the battery and slid it into the back, and then made sure to keep the IR receiver sticking out the side, with the wires that would go to the speaker sticking through the back of the shell. All that was left was to load up an SD card with Besho Frum's voice, which our friend Sam Forbes was kind enough to record for us.
Here we go again.
So now it's spa day for little Besho. I was able to remove any areas of silicone that I didn't like. It doesn't really want to peel off of the texture, but you can if you really put in some elbow grease. And then it was time to mix up some more of this magic I believe it's called Psycho Paint, which is a 2-part mix, the same one that I used on the face. And then you can drip in Vallejo craft paints or any other craft paint to stain it the color you want. We knew that we wanted to stick with an Anzellan color scheme, but give him sort of a distinctive profile that was true to just Besho. So we went with a gray with some different creams and some different flesh colors, but it paints on a little gloopy, but it does paint on and gives a really cool texture. And knowing that this was not only going to adhere to the silicone, but add even more cool skin texture was very exciting for us. The only caveat I'll add on this Psycho Paint for silicone is that it does have a pretty speedy dry time. So as soon as the 2 parts are mixed up, it starts to set. You have about 20 minutes to work with. So I ended up doing it in batches and mixing as quickly as I could. So for some of these things like the blends between the darker gray into the flesh or into the cream areas, those had to be mixed very quickly.
This is definitely one of the more ambitious builds that Danny and I have worked on, and I think we were nervous going throughout this project that it might not work out the way we wanted it to, but as we started putting all of the components back together, it became clear that we really had created this really interesting Anzellan character of Besho Frum.
This was one of those times when I was a little bit worried it wasn't going to get put back together the right way because I hadn't paid attention or taken any notes as I was taking him apart. But it did. It's all going to be okay. Don't worry.
You may notice those 2 distinct green and yellow wires protruding from Besho's back. Those are the wires that run to the speaker in his stomach. We knew we needed to run those into the back, into the Arduino, so that we could connect the voice box to the speaker.
This was such a happy moment when he still functioned. So with Besho's body sort of fleshed out, quite literally, it was time to turn my attention to his costume. So we knew we wanted him to really exist as his own character in the Star Wars universe, and that meant an entirely new outfit. So Alex and I went to the craft store and picked sort of a purple and black color scheme that felt a little regal, felt a little mysterious, and that allowed us to bring his costume to life in a way that was cohesive. So for his little wrist wraps here, which on the Besho toy are sculpted plastic, we thought we would just wrap them in a sort of flexible fabric glue that we would wet the fabric and then wrap it around, and it stayed super well. Turns out with enough glue, you can do anything. I also realized I had neglected to do his fingies and toesies, so I used actual nail polish to give his fingernails and toenails a coat, and then a little bit of craft paint just to distress them and give them a little grit, a little Anzellan dirt, if you will.
While watching Rise of Skywalker and Mando for reference images of Anzellans, we discovered that each Anzellan appears to have their own unique visor. So we made the choice to 3D print our own, and then kit bashed components onto it to give Besho his own signature visor. We based the helmet and visor in black airbrush primer, and then added a layer of airbrush chrome after the primer had dried. We used a thin layer of clear UV resin over some tape in order to create lenses inside of the visor, which worked pretty well.
The yellow headpiece that comes with the Babu Frick toy is this sort of sculpted rubber, and it actually lends a lot of structure to the toy itself, so we figured we should probably keep it, but for ours we decided to make it look more like a metal helmet, and then I sewed this fabric cowl that would go underneath it. So because there's no structure behind Babu Frick's skull here, adding that layer, that helmet layer back, helped us keep that Anzellan head shape in place. Because we were getting dangerously close to having to leave for Galactic Starcruiser, I ended up sewing Besho's pants off camera, but I think they're such handsome little Anzellan harem pants. We also took the existing belt that came on Babu Frick and ended up converting his belt to just a belt buckle, which means that you can still use the speaker feature for the Babu Frick and the sound will travel through his tummy. So it's sort of a clever workaround to let the functionality of the toy still work, but let Besho have a full personality and an original wardrobe.
Once Besho was all dressed, we were able to connect the Arduino to the speaker running to his stomach, get it all placed into the backpack, and run the IR receiver to the outside.
I'm Besho Frum.
We did it!
Maybe never again? I don't know.
We learned so much doing this project.
Yeah, for better or for worse, there were some learnings on this one. Good and bad learnings. You learned Arduino as a novice to a
Intermediate novice. In the journey of learning how to use Arduino, I bought far too many components. I actually just copied and pasted a bunch of code together and spent a really long time trying to figure out how to get a remote to only send one signal at a time instead of just button mashing signals over and over again. Thanks ChatGPT for solving that problem for me. I spent days trying to solve that problem, and ChatGPT figured it out in a matter of minutes.
We actually used ChatGPT to write a backstory for Besho Frum as well, and it did a pretty bang-up job.
It knows all about why an Anzellan would decide to be a first-order sympathizer. We took apart Babu Frick to see if we could change his components on the inside, and we were very afraid we would not be able to put him back together again, but like Humpty Dumpty, some things are possible. Wait, does it work out for Humpty Dumpty in the end?
Oh no.
Anyway, we put back together Babu Frick, and then when we actually arrived on Galactic Starcruiser, his neck had a strange crick in it where he would continually jerk his head to one side. So while we understood how the mechanics worked, we were not able to get it quite where it originally was.
I think one interesting learning was as we got into the internal mechanics of how much room we would have, realizing very quickly that we couldn't fit all of the Arduino components into Besho, so pivoting to the backpack and then designing a little backpack that felt true to his character and true to sort of Star Wars design aesthetics was a fun challenge. My previous experience glowing up toys has mostly been on this channel so far, so this was particularly interesting because one thing I really wanted was that skin texture. So that took some fun trial and error and a lot of new products.
Danny came to me one day and went, I'm gonna try to coat his skin in silicone. I can't find any evidence that someone has done this before, but we're just gonna try it. And then we did it and it worked. So, trial and error.
Skin and sewing were my two big learnings.
Something you will not see in this video at all is the shoulder harness saddle that we created for Besho to ride on.
We were originally going to have him ride on our shoulder like a little space parrot, but he was a little heavy and the shoulder harness was engineered at the last minute, not to seriously nerdy standards.
We ended up pivoting and using a bag to carry him around.
We winged it, wung it. It worked.
Wanged it.
No.
We were down to the wire on this one.
Crafts take a long time.
Yeah.
Always allow for more time than you think you'll need. Otherwise, it'll be the night before you leave for your trip and you'll still be hot gluing your Anzellan friend.
A big shout out to our friend Sam, who recorded all of our Anzellan lines for this.
And also big shout out to our Starcruiser 7, our group of 6 friends, plus Besho, who went on their most recent Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser trip. We had an amazing time, and to the cast and crew of Galactic Starcruiser, you are forever in our hearts. Safe journeys to all of you.
Thank you so much. If you think it's exciting that we broke open a toy, changed its guts, put it back together, painted it, gave it some new clothes, then like and subscribe, because we're probably going to do weird stuff like this more.
And now it's time for some final footage.
Hello, I'm Besho Frum, Bright Suns. This is a buck not for real credits.
What? What did he say? What? This, you think you can take me, little Anzelin? Huh?
That's no Besho's fault. Reckon not walking.
Well, but the fact that I almost died because I couldn't move two of my fingers was your fault.
No.
Yes, it was. I understand you can't apologize, but you have to at least accept responsibility, or this whole thing starts over again.
No. It's like I said, no refunds, no excuses.
His species does
Here
not
we go
understand
again.
apologies. He doesn't apologize, but he won't accept that he made a mistake either.
I consider what you say. And I say no.
Everybody makes mistakes. That's part of being alive. That's
And just keep bringing up hand thing.
Oh.
No backpack, back user.
just immediately taking me inside. Wow. He's small, he's cute, but he's a son of a bitch.
Hey, Mashi, goodbye.
Remember Gimlet?
Say hello to YouTube, Gimlet. There's some really good videos about like building terrestrial aquariums.
Is it aquaria? Do you say aquaria?
Ooh, like multiple
I've
aquariums?
never heard anyone ever say aquaria.
I study aquaria. They've got a decanter of like fish, like a beta fish, and a...